Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about variables and then talk about evaluating expressions. And then with that, what is evaluating and what is an expression? So first, what is a variable? I know you've seen variables before, but it's a good reminder that a variable is just really a placeholder for an unknown value. Okay, and usually as a placeholder, we use a letter to represent that unknown value. Make sure you're writing this down, it's important. And when I say an unknown value, I mean an unknown number. So if you say like 3x, okay, that means 3 times x. We don't know what x is, but it's some unknown number. So it could be 3 times 4 if x is 4, but we just don't know what that number is. Okay, and what does it mean to evaluate? Which is different than solving. So solving, you're solving an equation for an unknown variable, but evaluate essentially means to work out the problem and find a numerical solution, or basically just like calculate it. And I'm being very general because it could be a lot of different things, but when you calculate it, you should get out of a numerical value. Okay, so you evaluate something when it doesn't have an equal sign versus you solve something when it has an equal sign. So in what scenario would you not have an equal sign? Well, that's with an expression. Okay, an expression is kind of like an equation, but it doesn't have an equal sign. It's just like a mathematical statement. Just think of it as a statement. So an example of an expression are all these problems you'll see below here. So this first one is an expression because it doesn't have an equal sign. It's just like a statement, like this is what it is. Same thing with this and all the problems we're going to look at today. Actually, I'm sorry. Number 4 is actually going to be an equation, but an expression is one without the equal sign. Okay, and you're going to evaluate these, which means to get a value out. So at the end of this, you should have a number as your answer. Okay, number or value, whatever word you want to use. And the way we're going to do this is by substitution. So let me explain what that means for this example. So it says given t equals 6, which means, a variable is normally a placeholder for an unknown value. So in this expression, this t is unknown, but I'm telling you what t is so we can evaluate it. Okay, and if t is equal to 6, that means anywhere you see a t, we know that it's equal to 6. So you can substitute 6 in for the t. So this expression would become, instead of t, we replace it or substitute 6 in over 3 minus 10. And again, your knowledge of integer operations and order of operations, so PEMDAS, is going to come into play here. So just as a quick reminder, I'm going to write PEMDAS on the top of my page. And if you're evaluating, you can't leave it like that. You actually have to get a value out, which is where that comes in handy. Okay, so remember 6 over 3 is a fraction, but fraction just means divide. So this is 6 divided by 3. And in PEMDAS, we do multiplication and division before we do addition or subtraction. So I'm going to go ahead and divide 6 by 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. Minus 10, because we haven't done anything with that yet. We just evaluated this piece. And what's 2 minus 10? Well, you have $2, and then you lose $10, so now you're in debt. And you're in debt $8. Okay, so again, integer operations, order of operations, all helpful in evaluating expressions. An expression is just essentially a statement without an equal sign, and you can only evaluate it if I give you the value that that variable represents. So we said t equals 6. Okay, we're going to do another together. So this time you're given 2 different values. So there are 2 variables, a and b, and a is equal to -3. And b is equal to -9. And the directions are still to evaluate the expression. Okay, I'm going to first say that, okay, I know a is equal to -3. I know b is equal to -9. So right now those variables are placeholders, but since I'm telling you what they are, you can substitute them in. So I'm going to put this in parentheses because they have a negative sign. It's just easier to look at. So a is now replaced with -3, and b is now replaced with -9. Okay, because A is -3 and B is -9. Okay, there's a lot of signs there. That's why I threw it in parentheses. It's a little bit easier to look at now. But just remember, when you have parentheses next to each other like this, it means to multiply. And multiplying comes before subtraction. So we're going to multiply these two together first when we remember our order of operations. So I'm going to leave this first part because we're not doing anything with that. We're just multiplying -3 times -9. What's a negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 9 is 27. Okay, so -3 times -9 is 27. So this problem was -2 minus this whole grouping right here. Let's highlight that. Now it's -2 minus 27 because that grouping simplifies to 27. Okay, so -2 minus 27, again, going back to integer operations, you're $2 in debt, and then you lose $27 more. So not only are you still in debt, but you're in debt a little bit more. You're now in debt $29. Okay, so we got to remember our stuff from the previous videos when we're doing evaluating as well. Okay, I'm actually going to leave number 3 for you to try on your own. On a separate piece of paper, write it in your notes. Okay, I'll give you a little hint. X is -4, so you want to substitute that in everywhere you see X. Okay, and then you should be able to evaluate. And again, a fraction is just division, so you'll square X, you'll subtract 4, you'll divide by X. See what you get there. Watch your signs. What's -4 squared? I'll kind of leave it at that, and if you guys have questions, make sure you write it at the end of the video. Okay, you can also evaluate if you have an equation. So I just wanted to throw this in, even though it's not an expression, but just to make sure you guys have enough knowledge to complete the practice. Okay, so you have an equation, P equals SQ, which again, if they're written together like this, it's just multiplication, minus E. And I just realized the instructions are a little screwed up here. This should say find P, not D. So you want to find P if S is 10, Q is 5, and E is 200. So you have 3 different variables here, and you're going to evaluate, which means you can substitute all those variables in where they belong. So S would go in for S, Q would go in for Q, and E would go here. So let's just rewrite that first. I always recommend you writing out all your steps as problems get more complicated. Actually, just always. So I know S is 10. I'm just going to write 10 in for X, not 1, but 10. I know Q is 5. And remember, those things are just being multiplied. SQ means S times Q. So I'm writing it as multiplication here. I mean, if you really want, you can do like 10 times 5, but I like the parentheses. And then you're going to subtract whatever E is, and we know that E is equal to 200. Okay. Now, order of operations says to multiply first. So what's 10 times 5? Is 50. And then you're going to subtract 200. And remember, your whole goal is to find P, which is why I didn't give you a variable for, or a value for P, is because that's what you're trying to solve. So in this case, you're really solving an equation more or less in addition to just evaluating. So anyways, P is equal to 50 minus 200. So you have $50 in the bank, and then you lose $200. So now you're in debt, and you're in debt $150. Okay, so P in this case is equal to negative 150. Okay, so overall, you know, a variable, it's just a placeholder for some value, but if you know what the value is, you can substitute it into an equation or an expression to get a numerical answer. That's all I have for you today, but if you have any questions, especially on the one I left you to try on your own here, make sure you do that. Please let me know. Take care.